That's great. Now you're muted. But let's see.
I hear you.
You're muted. So it could, you could actually, it could go a little higher if you do have like another, very intellectual, thick book from Oxford.
That I have. We can keep going.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, I'm sure you have an endless supply of thick books. So, yes. So, yeah. So, one more would be good. If you could do one more, that'd be great.
Wow. Okay.
I know it gets a little tenuous after a while, but you just have to be careful.
Bingo.
Remember the kids' book with the guy with all the hats on his head?
Mm-hmm. I do.
I always remember. That's what I always feel like here.
Hats for sale.
Yeah.
I think that was it.
Yeah, hats for sale. Yeah, I'm sitting on like about 5 pillows and my computer's on about 5 boxes. So, oh, that's great, Jesse. Much better. Okay. All right, terrific. So, all right, so it's already 6 o'clock. So let me do my Facebook Live business here.
Okay, you're gonna announce, Deb, right? I'm gonna wait for your cue. Okay.
Right. Okay. All right. Yes. Okay, just hang on one moment. Okay, now don't mess around with me here. Okay. Let's see. Oops, hang on, I spelling it right. Okay. Okay, are we ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. Welcome to another candidate conversation from 25 Women for 2020 and co-sponsored by the Progressive Democrats of LaPorte County. So we're just excited to be here with everyone. And we have a special guest, Jessie Kharbanda, who is a well-known Indiana environmental policy expert. And so we are just very pleased to get to poke into your mind and learn everything you know. So I think first we're going to go around and we'll introduce our candidates. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shannon, our strategy director, and she will manage our introductions.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks to Jessie and all who are joining us for this very important topic. Let's get down to our panel of candidates first. We have Angela Elliott. Angela, what district are you from?
Hi, I live in Center Grove, and I'm running for state representative in House District 93.
Excellent. And next we have Cinde Reinert. Hello, Cinde. What district are you from?
I live in Greenwood, and I'm running for House District 58, which is just east of Angela's district and south.
Awesome. And Julie Snider. Hi, Julie.
Hi, I want to make sure my mute was off. Hi, I'm representing District 33, House District 33, and it is Eastern and Southern Delaware County, and then all of Randolph and Jay County.
Thanks. And Theresa Bruno.
Hello, I'm Theresa
Theresa.
Bruno, and I'm running for Indiana State Senate District 28. I live in Warren Park, which is like a small town in Marion County, and my district encompasses a portion of the east side of Indianapolis, all of Hancock County, and a little bit of Shelby.
Perfect. And Emma Steele.
Sorry. Sorry, I didn't do my job right. There we go.
There's Emma. Emma, and your district is?
I'm running for House District 84, which is on the northeast corner of Fort Wayne, the northeast corner of Allen County. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. And Laura Fred Smith.
Hi, I'm Laura Fred Smith, and I'm running in Senate District 18, which covers Cass, Fulton, Miami County, portions of Kosciuszko, Marshall, and Carroll County.
And last but not least, we have Tiffany
sorry. We missed Cindy Wirth, so we need to go back and get her in just a
Yeah, we'll
moment.
get.
I'm so sorry. I was distracted. Tiffany Grant. I am here in Martinsville. I'm running for House District 60, which is a chunk of Morgan County and a little bit of Monroe County as well. Thank
Great.
you.
And thanks. We'll go to Cindy Wirth then. Hi, Cindy.
Tiffany. Hi, I'm Cindy Wirth. I live in Columbus, Indiana, and I'm running for State Senate District 44, which is part of Bartholomew County, part of Jackson County, part of Monroe County, and all of Brown and Lawrence County.
Perfect. And I know we introduced a lot of people to get to know these people better, and our whole team of 27 women at 25 Women for 2020, go to 25womenfor2020.org. With a simple click along each candidate's picture, it'll take you to their resources where you can find out more about their platforms, their experiences, and their qualifications to be your representative. Thanks so much. We'll send it back to Deb and Jesse.
All right. So Jesse, thanks again for joining us. And so we want to start with you, and we hope that you can give us, just a good idea of what the most important environmental issues are that we need to be thinking about as we go to the polls and vote in November. What should we all be keeping in mind?
All right. Well, thank you, Deb, for having me on, and it's so good to meet all of you. I know a few of you, and it's great to be acquainted with all of you. And I'm first of all want to express my appreciation to all of you for running. It's a tremendous endeavor, and whatever happens, you're making an impact, a big impact in your community for doing so. So I want to begin by simply raising one broad point, which is often, if I'm running into someone at the grocery store or including a talk, I'll often hear two narratives about the state of the environment in Indiana. One is that all is well, and the sky is clear, and the water seems reasonable. And then the other is that everything's in despair. Indiana is at the bottom of the pile, and we are hopelessly going to be at the bottom. Neither narrative, in my view, in looking at the data and looking at the statistics, is accurate. But what is accurate is that there are enduring environmental problems in our state. And how do I succinctly describe those? I want to do it by setting a few different scenes. So let's do a little virtual tour of Indiana, so to speak. Let's first go to an urban area in our state. Let's go to a low-income neighborhood in particular. And as we're walking into a home of a friendly homeowner, we may learn that there is lead in their paint because their home was built in the 1950s. We may learn that they have lead lines. And it turns out that about 100,000 Hoosiers have lead lines in their homes. It may be well more than that. That's just an assessment that was made by the Indianapolis Star in 2016. We might find that there's mold issues within the home. And then as we go outside, we take note of the fact that there are commercial trucks that are just whizzing through the neighborhood, and that the storm drain seems to be clogged. And as you look in not too far away, you find that there is diesel exhaust going into that low-income community. Oftentimes, you will find the fact that there's a real racial disparity there as well. That even though African Americans encompass 10% of the population, 25% of infant mortality is from the African American community. You find that communities of color have a 66% higher level of exposure to particulate matter than a non-community of color. And so what you find is a situation where there is an undue burden on low-income communities in a lot of urban parts of our state. And sometimes that can get the real spotlight when it comes to environmental issues, but there are serious problems that we can find in rural parts of Indiana as well. So now let's go to a rural home, a farmstead in some rural county, let's say Jay or Randolph. And what we might find there is a situation where the home is situated to be downwind of a confined animal feeding operation, also known as a factory farm. Or it is downwind of an outdoor wood boiler, which is a little device that is used to generate heat in some parts of rural Indiana, but that it can have really noxious fumes that can cause an array of respiratory problems. Then we look at the fact that about 1 in 4 Hoosiers have private drinking water wells. And those wells are disproportionately in rural Indiana. And think about the array of contaminants that rural Hoosier homestead could be exposed to from that private drinking water. It could be pesticides, it could be fertilizer, it could be factory farm manure, it could be coal ash. So you're beginning to get a picture that even though the environmental quality of the state has definitely moved in the right direction, overwhelmingly so, over the last 50-year period, since those landmark federal statutes in the 1970s, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and so forth. It is a reality that there are pockets of our state where people do bear undue burdens, and it may result in suffering in the here and now, or it may result in threats in the future. So now let's not leave out suburban Indiana. And there you have a situation that our waterways have no controls when it comes to pharmaceuticals. So any kind of pharmaceuticals that we may legitimately and legally flush down the toilet may end up in our filtration systems, and they're not filtered out because there are no federal drinking standards when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Or you might live in a beautiful subdivision in suburban Indiana, and yet you find that it was built on top of what was once a brownfield. And it turns out that there's vapor intrusion going into some of the basements of some of these suburban households. So what I hope I've done here is kind of painted a portrait of environmental health risks that can be found in urban, rural, and in suburban Indiana. Now let's talk about a couple of other scenes. Let's now go to a lake in Indiana. It turns out that about 20% of the acreage, lake acreage in our state, is such that you cannot make full body contact. You cannot swim in about 20% of the lake acres of our state. And it turns out about half of the total lake acres in our state are ones that we cannot fish in, nor wildlife thrive in. You also have situations where if there's a stream that flows into that lake, there may no longer be wetlands that are adjacent to that stream. And so as there is stormwater coming off of a farm field, or if there is a flood, all of a sudden the lake gets contaminated with all sorts of contaminants, whether that's pesticides or fertilizer, or again, factory farm manure that's spread on farm fields. So once again, you see that the threats facing Indiana's environment are here in the present. They are not problems that have been solved decades ago. They remain with us. I want to give 2 more scenes, and then I'll pause here. One is, let's now go to a forest. And let's say that it is a state-owned forest, and it has been subject to what's called single tree selection, which in principle is to just extract maybe a few trees here and there that might be aging and may fall inevitably, but they want to pull it out, or they may be quality pieces of hardwood that are sold to lumber yards. But you find that it's not just those trees that are pulled out, but you find that there could be a lot of collateral damage. And think about what that means for wildlife. And then you find out that there are nearly 150 species in Indiana that are either threatened or endangered as far as, or a considered species of conservation need. The final scene I want to take you to is of an abandoned factory. And here you have a situation where the owner is kind of at a loss as to what he or she should do. And they used to make brakes for the automobile industry, but that job has been exported to some other country. But it turns out that that product line could be retrofitted. The production line could be retrofitted to produce brakes that are put into wind turbines. So what I've tried to do here is to paint a portrait of the reality of environmental challenges in residential areas in suburban, urban, and rural Indiana, to talk about threats that face our lakes and face our forests, and finally to talk about the problem of deindustrialization. And could we look at it with despair, or can we look at it in terms of opportunity? So I would love to do in the end part of the discussion that we have to sort of lay out some solutions if there's time, and of course to field your thoughts and questions. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
All right, well, this is great. You did such a great job, Jesse, really painting of the variety of situations that we're facing here in Indiana. So I want to go through now and hear from our candidates, and they've got some stuff to say and they've got some plans. So we're gonna go through, and we're gonna start with Angela. So Angela, tell us what your priorities are.
Well, thanks, Deb. And thank you, Jesse, for painting that picture. I mean, I think that really was great, just to take us through the visual of all the different types of environments that we live in Indiana. My district, House District 93, includes the area southwest of downtown Indianapolis, including Peoria Township and Southport, and also in Marion County, and then also parts of Center Grove and Bargersville in Johnson County. And my platform is the 4 E's: education, employment, the environment, and equality for all. I chose these because I think that they are areas that our legislature needs to make a higher priority as we make policy and legislation, and that will give us all a better planet for the future. So we don't have to look far in my district. My district has a lot of suburban areas, but one of the things that Jesse talked about was some ground contamination. And we don't have to look far in my district to know that we need to make caring for our environment a higher priority so it doesn't make us sick. There are significant ground contamination issues to the east and to the west of my district. In both cases, industry has contaminated the soil with PCE, and that has infiltrated water supplies and air coming from the soil. And both of those have made people sick, in some cases causing cancer. And it took years for the impacts to show up from when the contamination occurred. And then it's taking many more years to clean it up. Martinsville does have a designated Superfund site that they're still working to clean up, and those plans still need a lot of discussion. So as a legislator, I want to work on legislation that can help us to prevent these accidents from happening in the future, as well as legislation that will help us make sure that after an accident happens, that those who live in the area are aware of the danger that exists, and have the appropriate supports and follow-up care if they have gotten sick or need to move. And there's a grassroots group called Who's Your Action that proposed a right to know law during the last legislative session. It wasn't given a hearing then, but that's the kind of groups I want to work with as a legislature. I want to work with citizen coalitions like Who's Your Action, and also there's one called If It Was Your Child that has been working in the Franklin area to implement pieces of legislation, both preventative as well as after the fact, that will help save lives. And I'd really like to hear, Jesse, if you know of if you've heard of that law that was coming forward, if you have any thoughts about it when we get to that point of the discussion.
All right, thank you, Angela. Okay, so Jesse, yeah, well, hopefully at the end, after we hear from our candidates, you can respond to all this. So, okay, next we're gonna move to Cindy Reinert. Cindy, so tell us about what your priorities are as as a candidate and as a state legislator.
Hi, Jesse. It's great to talk to you again. I guess as an overall, I really liked, like Angela said, the picture that you painted, because I was thinking today about, the lead poisoning that's gone on in Lake County. And people say, well, that's in Lake County. It doesn't matter to me as a legislator. I feel like I'm in charge of the state, right? I have issues here in my district, just as Angela was talking in Franklin. There are 34 pediatric cancer patients in my district that sort of emanated from the 24 that are currently in Franklin. However, it's a little more rural, so those are spread out. But the pediatric cancer cluster is located in my county. They're in, I believe it's in Morgan County. Their TCEs and PCEs are 150 times what are acceptable at IDEM. And then, we have all these coal ash pits, and how do we get rid of those? And what are some new and inquisitive ways that we can come up with to get rid of this coal ash, bury it, and be done with it? I did some research today on the marriage between IDEM and EPA, and I looked at the PPAs for since 2005 to 2021, and every single one of those is boilerplate language. Each agency has its own stewardship, and each agency is separate from the other, and they agree to be allies and this. But with my experience at the If It Was Your Child group in dealing with the EPA and dealing with IDEM on different levels, that boilerplate language should be able to be fixed. It's done by the legislature. Those agreements are done by the legislature. And there's no reason, if the EPA got wiped off the face of the earth, there is no reason that IDEM can't pick the ball up and enforce its own rules. And the state legislature can make those rules and hold IDEM to certain standards. The enforcement is the piece of the puzzle that I haven't been able to figure out. So I'd really like to hear what you have to say about that too.
All right, well, thanks, Cindy. Okay, so next we're gonna go to Julie Snider. All right, Julie, tell us about your environmental priorities in Indiana.
Hi, thanks again for having us. Jesse, thanks for being here. And Deb and Shannon, you guys are awesome for doing things like this for us. It's so helpful. Like I said, I'm from District 33, which is a very rural district. It's all of Jay and Randolph counties, and then a very rural part of Delaware County as well. So my campaign has been focusing on education. I'm a public school teacher, but also economic development. And as far as like what we're talking about today, I think it definitely goes hand in hand with economic development. In fact, in my district, there's two huge wind turbine farms, one in Randolph and one in Jay, going up as we speak. So when I knew about this forum, I started racking my brain trying to think of what the priorities were. I know plenty of farmers that I've been talking to, and they have a lot of issues out here. We have two huge landfills, one in Randolph, one in Jay. We have a huge ethanol plant right outside of Portland. So there's a lot of that, but it seems like the things that kept coming up when I was speaking to farmers were two main issues. And one is loss of topsoil from the rain events that we're having and how it's been impacting just the quality of topsoil, and the fact that they have been having to plant later and later just because of the weather. And so one farmer actually hooked me up with an assessment that Purdue did. So I found a couple key findings I wanted to read to you guys. One was, it said increasing winter and spring precipitation will result in about a 30 to 50% increase in spring subsurface tile drain flow in Indiana by mid-century. These shifts will likely lead to nutrient loss from farm fields, and some existing drains might be overwhelmed by the higher flows. Where I live, we're already seeing that. I mean, there's a farm right behind my house, huge acreage, and it floods like you wouldn't believe. And this farmer has tried everything. I mean, we've lived in our house for 30 years, and I think he's probably replaced tiles 3 or 4 times at least, trying to make it work, and he hasn't been successful. Also, I wanted to tell you guys a little story. This farm, or this field behind our house, he rotates his crops. He'll go soybeans a couple years, then he'll go corn, soybeans, corn. It's been like that every year for 30 years. Well, this year, I saw something growing out there that wasn't soybeans and corn. And, and I'm kind of a city girl, but I knew it wasn't corn or soybeans. So I asked a farmer friend of mine to come over and tell me, for the first time in 30 years since we lived here, he planted a cover crop. Okay, he planted it was like ryegrass, I think is what he called it. And he said it was to replace the nutrients to help, the topsoil, so he can still continue to plant what he wanted. So I just thought that was very telling too, that, in all the years we've lived here, this is the first time I've noticed him doing that. And then one of the other issues that they keep bringing up is the warmer temperatures. Like, it may not seem much to us, but the overnight temperatures have been elevated in a way that's causing loss in crop yields. I had no idea, of course, until I was talking to these farmers about that. One observation it had in this assessment was that Indiana corn yields are reduced by about 2% for every 1 degree increase in overnight temperatures during the month of July. So, like, something that we wouldn't notice obviously is impacting crops like corn. And I was talking to one farmer, and they're already trying to adjust to that, right? They're trying to look for different breeds of corn that could withstand the temperatures and things like that. But that's a real problem that climate change is bringing, and it's something that the normal citizens like us, we may not see. But as a legislator, and an educator, I feel like education is going to be key in that, right? We have to funnel more money to studying all of those things that impact agriculture. We're going to have to make sure that places like Purdue have the funding that they need, the grants, so they can keep studying how to help these farmers adjust. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Julie. Okay. Next, we're going to go to Theresa Bruno. There you are. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Theresa Bruno, and I'm running for Indiana State Senate District 28. My priorities are education. I teach part-time at a local community college, infrastructure, economic development, and also healthcare. And I'm kind of piggybacking off of Julie's because I joined the board for the town of Warren Park back in 2015. And, there are really like 2 big complaints that you get in local government is the condition of your roads and also flooding. And especially in Warren Park, we have like just this one area on the parkway that always floods whenever we get even just a little bit of rain. And, they've pumped out the storm drains. We've tried a lot of different things. And then, so that's kind of like how I got interested in flooding and its effects on infrastructure, because we recently had to get part of the stretch of the parkway repaved because it just keeps getting flooded over, and I can already see wear and tear on that, and I worked so hard to get that repaved. So so that's what I'm going to talk about, just like flooding and infrastructure. One of the really awesome things about running for office is I get even more excuses to learn about new things. And I just kind of went down a whole rabbit hole for 2 hours today, and it was just absolutely great. So flooding is getting worse, and there are a couple of reasons for that. To Purdue's climate change impact assessment, and I think Julie referenced that earlier. Since 1895, Central Indiana is receiving on average 5.6 more inches of rain per year. And it's really accelerating as well. Like in the beginning half of the 20th century, it would be maybe a quarter more inch of rain a year. And then it's getting to be more and more. And also sometimes, in central Indiana, it just seems like more and more we'll get like 2 inches of rain in like an hour. I remember, I think it was 4 years ago, and my tomato plants were looking so good that year. So good. And then all of a sudden we got like 4 inches of rain in a short amount of time, and there were no tomatoes that year. And I'm an Italian grandmother at heart. So it was just really, really disappointing. So, yes, so increased rainfall is one of the problems, and also increased urbanization. And I really think about my friends. My district is very diverse. It's urban, suburban, and rural. In my district, McCordsville is growing really quickly. Greenfield's growing really quickly. New Pal is growing really quickly. I'm in their neighborhood chat groups, and they notice that when a new subdivision goes in, there's increased flooding. And they never had flooding problems before, but now they are, or it's just getting worse. And that's what happens is, like, the more buildings that go up, the more offices, the more roads, there's a less chance for that rainwater to get absorbed into the soil. So we're gonna, central Indiana is gonna continue to grow. It looks like, our rainfall is going to increase. And added to that problem is our infrastructure, and our roads are already in poor condition. I went to the American Society of Civil Engineers website, and they have a report card for all the states. And some of their statistics, where are they? And it was a little frightening, actually. Like, we have like 1,435 bridges that are structurally deficient. And my husband, who's a civil engineer, was saying, if there's like a really, really bad flood, those bridges could fail. And my first response is, I don't ever want to go on a bridge again, but you kind of have to. And also talked about, the number of lanes of road that are deficient as well. And they seem to be all in my district. I tell you, I'm always dodging potholes here. And so we just have this problem, right? We're getting more rainfall, we're building more and more houses, and there isn't enough money for infrastructure in Indiana. And, and so I'm interested in, Jesse, your opinion on this as well. One of the things that I really liked is, and I think it'd be even the most cost-efficient way, is preserving our wetlands, because they absorb huge amounts of water. And also talking about, healthy soils, and like having like a rain garden in your yard. And I'm in the process of doing that. It's basically rain gardening. It's just like a little depression in your yard, and you plant native flowers. And then, like, when it rains, like, it's better at soaking up the rain. And so those are like some of the solutions that seem to be like the lowest of cost that you could do. Yeah, I went to some other like engineering sites, and they're like, yeah, you can really build the bridge up and make it super strong. But I'm like, where's the money going to come from? So, so preserving our wetlands and, better planning out of our cities and our suburbs, I think, is a much cheaper option. And then really, making sure that all of our bridges can withstand a 500-year flood. So.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Theresa. That's a lot. That's great. You've got a lot. You get a lot of things to do when you are a legislator.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move next to Cinde Wirth. Hi, Cinde.
Thank you, Jesse, for being here. The short version of my background is that I'm a scientist. I'm a climate reality corps leader, and I'm an environmental science teacher, which includes alternative energy. So we've been talking and hearing a long time in Indiana and the rest of the nation about needing to embrace alternative, renewable, and clean energy sources for producing electricity. And we've been hearing this for decades now. When I was a university biology student in the 1990s, we had really high hopes
that by now in 2020, we would live in a state and a nation where we fully embraced clean energy solutions and our air and our water pollution concerns would be relegated and studied as history. Not something that, we would probably still be addressing on a daily basis, especially with the advent of the legal protections under the EPA and the Clean Water, Clean Air Act, things like that. So it's difficult for me as a biologist and an environmental scientist and teacher to talk to kids about this. So it led me to apply for a fellowship, and I ended up in Washington, D.C., looking at policy there because of everything that's happening. So I think most everyone today understands that we need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels for energy as much as we possibly can. And Julie talked about the wind farm near her, so we know Indiana is doing a bit of this. It's also common knowledge that wind and solar, although there are others, that are the two most efficient and cost-effective technologies for us to generate power. The glitch has been for a while is that power storage was a real limiting factor. We have recent leaps in battery technologies that are super exciting. I saw so many on Capitol Hill when I was there through the Department of Energy programs that it's unbelievable what we have coming down the pipeline. And it's almost like living in a sci-fi movie now, at least to me, being as old as I am. So when I look at all of this, you take into consideration Indiana's been relying on coal for generations. The air pollution from these coal-fired power plants is a key piece of Indiana having one of the lowest air quality ratings in the US. The coal ash byproduct contains concentrated toxic heavy metals that end up in our groundwater, our lakes, and our rivers. And this is a huge problem for our lungs, for our drinking water, for our natural areas, our recreational waters, and our entire ecosystem. And Jesse, you talked a little bit about that with your story of what it looks like. And it's not all a doom and gloom, but we're so far from where we could have been, especially when we look at poor air quality hits us really hard with COVID-19 since the pandemic is a respiratory virus. And right now, Indiana's asthma and lung disease rates are well above the national average. It's awful, especially when you look at southern Indiana or the northern Indiana shoreline areas. We look at other states that have moved forward the past few decades and embraced these new solar and wind technologies on a large scale. But sadly, and I'm just going to put it out there, Indiana has elected officials that propose legislation that promotes continuing this devastating pollution that takes away the health and safety from the average Hoosier living in these areas, and at the same time handsomely lines the legislators' pockets. And for someone who's a scientist, and I mean that's what I concern myself with, watching this kind of corruption and seeing it and seeing how deep it goes, I realize it's been setting Indiana back for decades now. Last year, in 2019, the Indiana General Assembly created a 21st Century Energy Policy Development Task Force. And it was an interim study committee to look at moving to clean renewable energy in our state. 21st Century Task Force. This task force was created just shy of 20 years into the 21st century. Indiana is late to this game, really late. I was looking at this in the 1990s when I was in college. And coal is the most carbon intensive polluting fuel and we have had the technology to replace it for decades. So the real issue here is the accountability of our elected officials and their accountability to the coal industry itself and their own personal profit. And it's difficult for me to put this out there because I'm not sort of an adversarial kind of person. I'm a scientist, but I'm also a mom. And a daughter, and I look at my relatives who have lung issues, and it's not where we should be. We need to get to work to build a job sector in renewable energy equipment production, as you were talking about retooling factories for other purposes, to offset our recently lost jobs, especially after the pandemic. Move Hoosier power generation plants into the 21st century instead of committing to study them for more years and years and years, while our elected officials tasked with leading these study team get richer and richer from fossil fuel investments of their own. I had high school students working to solve these issues in 2011. 2011, this is 2020. They reach out to me all the time still. It's inexcusable that Indiana is so far behind and that we're just forming committees to study this at the state level when these solutions have already been determined and we know what they are, we know how they work, and we know how to do them. But with legislators still determining how best to make a profit from the coal sunset, at the same time, we have Hoosiers with hugely high rates of asthma and lung disease, not getting any better. So those are the things that I'm really concerned about with environmental issues. I mean, there are more. You know, I cover the whole gamut as a biologist. So, but the exciting thing is if we stop all of the studying and the rhetoric and put some accountability in there, the exciting things that a lot of the federal funding has been supporting for years is out there, and the technology is ready. But thank you again for everything.
Great. All right. I'd be so excited to see you in the State House with all of your knowledge and your experience. All right. So we're going to move next to Emma Steele. Hi, Emma.
Hey. I just want to start by thanking you, Jessie, for taking the time to be with us on this call. I really appreciated getting your perspective on all of these. I know that you're a really prominent guy in environmental policy in Indiana, so it means a lot that you took the time to talk to us. To continue on the notes of Cinde, talking about alternative energy and climate change, I'm personally very interested in the economic opportunity of addressing our environmental issues in Indiana, particularly that of climate change. Like you said earlier, Jessie, I think that it's really easy for us to see nothing but hurdles and negatives when we look at climate change and our environmental issues in the state. But in reality, I think there's a lot of room for growth in our economy. And I think there's a lot of things for our economy to gain from addressing the climate crisis, particularly in job growth. You know, Indiana has solar potential. Indiana has wind energy potential. And with all that production potential comes jobs. Skilled jobs that can sustain careers and skilled jobs that pay well, jobs that can emerge in all corners of the state, including right here in my home turf, District 84 out of Fort Wayne. So what I would really like to see is our leadership embracing the economic growth that comes with embracing a whole new sector of green energy and encouraging those jobs to spring up, especially now when a lot of Hoosiers are looking for career shifts as a result of COVID-19. Part of my plan to address climate change at the state level in Indiana is to work with leadership and create a jobs pathways program that would train current fossil fuel employees in new clean energy jobs so that as we shift away from fossil fuels, no one is getting left behind. Because it's, you know, it's a totally valid fear when you hear, let's shift away from fossil fuels and you're a coal employee, you know, that's your living. And you need that to feed your family. And we also need to recognize the fact that we do need fossil fuels as it stands today. And so we're going to have this gradual shift if we're not going to disrupt Hoosier lives. And so the shift to carbon neutral does not have to be disruptive. And it can be prosperous for our state. But we need to start today, and we need leadership that's going to encourage the shift from fossil fuels and encourage growth in alternative energy and encourage these jobs that Hoosiers are going to need as we shift away from fossil fuels. So I would love to get your take, Jessie, on, you know, where we are in terms of the shift to carbon neutral and what you think about, you know, creating a jobs pathways programs to help us get away from fossil fuels.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Emma. Okay, and next we're going to go to Laura Fred Smith.
Hi, my expertise, or what I've been doing for about the last 15 years, I've been teaching earth science, and I also teach in environmental science. And so when people talk around me, they think that they can't really do anything to help the environment because they always talk about how they need to decrease their ecological footprint. And we live in a very rural area. I live in Cass County and I live in Royal Center, so I'm surrounded by farms. And I taught in Winnemac, which was very rural and surrounded by farms. And to decrease their ecological footprint, most people think what that means is that they have to bike to work, they have to change their light bulbs, they have to use the low flow shower heads. And when I tell people that my house is set at 68 degrees in the winter and 78 degrees in the summer, people think I'm crazy because that's too hot or too cold for their house. And nobody likes to take the showers with the low flow shower heads because everybody likes really good shower pressure. And then there's no such thing as a public transportation as a bus in our small towns that I have in my district. So that leads people to think that they can't do anything or be good environmental stewards. And I just like to point out that they're wrong. They really can. In Cass County, we are battling a really big company that has a poor environmental record, and it's called the Whale Sustainable Products, or WSP. And this company has been found to have a terrible environmental record, and they have been fined by the EPA in several cases in other places where they have plants. And they are called Whale Sustainable Products, and it makes it seem like they're a good company because they're sustainable, and that's the buzzword that people use. And they're a zinc recycling facility. But Cass County residents have learned to become experts in the field of environmental research. They now know what bioaccumulation means, and they have researched lead poisoning and mercury poisoning, and they understand EPA regulations and IDEM and how those two work together and the gaps that they have now in what that actually means. They actually have done research on industry emissions and heavy industry and what makes heavy industry versus light industry. So Cass County residents have kind of got a crash course in environmental issues and how that what that means for their everyday life, and particularly in lead and mercury and toxins and toxic environments, and then how that's going to affect their soil because we are a farming community. So WSP and the plant has really brought the community together and has taught them how to be good environmental citizens and good environmental stewards. And then across the political divide, even if we can't agree on whether climate change is real, both Republicans and Democrats, they agree on some of the mitigation factors for what we need to do to limit the effects of climate change. Flooding is another issue, not only in Theresa's district, but in one of my counties, 80% of Miami County is susceptible to floods. I know in Royal Center, we had a flood a few years ago, and my basement was, 5 feet deep of water because we had poor storm drains. And so one of those mitigation factors that people agree with to help prevent some of that from climate change is just planting trees. And that's one of those environmental stewardships that you can do to be a good citizen of the environment. And everybody can plant trees. You can go out and you can go in your yard and you can plant trees, or you can have a butterfly garden, or you can have little way stations for bees that come by, so you can plant a bee-friendly garden. And that's something that you can do. So instead of just, thinking you can't do something to reduce your ecological footprint because you really like those long hot showers in the morning, you can still do something by looking at EPA regulations. What kind of legislation is coming up that you need to be aware of? Speak to your representatives. Speak to any of these women on the 25 Women for 2020, because we would love to talk to anybody about issues that we are running for. And when we get into office, everybody can just call us because we'll be willing to talk to anybody. What kind of government, your county government, what issues do you have in your county government that are related to the environment? Do you have a community garden in your county government or in your city? What can you do to help improve the life in your city? And so to be a good environmental steward, it doesn't just mean change your light bulb. It doesn't mean just take your bike to work. It means doing everything you can to help the environment. And that might just mean speaking to your legislators. It might just mean voting for the environment to correct any problems that we have at national levels, state levels, and local levels. because being an environmental steward means leaving the environment better than the way we found it. So I would really like to know if Jesse would be interested in talking to people in Cass County about WSP, because he mentioned some things that I was like, we would care about that here in Cass County. So that's what I've been
All right. All right, thank you, Laura. That's terrific. And you have done more than you're letting on to help all those citizens become informed. And you've been a terrific advocate for your community. And so you're going to be a great legislator come November. So, all right, we're going to move now to Tiffany Grant. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, thank you so much. I have really appreciated what Jesse has said, what the other candidates on this forum have said about environmental policy and the costs involved and the opportunities that are available. What I wanted to focus on is really how environmental policy affects the people, right? So we know it affects communities, but it affects individual people. And those are the people, that's what I think about when I want to become a representative. I want to represent people and the individuals in my district who are maybe not being appropriately represented now, or who just want better representation than what they're currently getting. When I think about environmental policy, I'm thinking about the impact on the quality of life for each person. And it's not just like the cost of their electricity or what their ecological footprint is. And I know Laura made some really great points about that, right? Our house also 78 degrees in the summer. I don't know how cold we keep it in the winter. I try not to pay too close attention. We just use blankets because we know that we can save money that way as people. But there are hidden costs that we don't always think about. And one of those hidden costs is healthcare. So we talk about environmental policy, we talk about healthcare policy, we don't always put those two together. And the environment has a huge impact on our physical well-being, on our emotional and mental well-being. And so not only does it create healthcare costs, right? Specific prices for services. In my area, Angela mentioned, we have an EPA Superfund site because of groundwater contamination. And we don't currently have a hospital in my district in Martinsville. I'm sorry, we don't have a hospital in Martinsville, but we did gain a cancer treatment center. Okay, so we know there are monetary figures, real dollars attached to environmental concerns and healthcare concerns. But we don't always talk about the emotional, the physical well-being of all of the people. Maybe it doesn't equate to dollars, but it equates to the quality of life that we are living. And you cannot put a price tag on that. When we're talking about children going through cancer treatment, the effect it has on the entire family cannot be quantified monetarily, but it absolutely does impact the quality of life. When we talk about flooding, when we talk about farmlands struggling to produce crops, we're talking about the quality of life of the farmers in this community and their families. The kiddos who maybe don't have the resources they need for all of their ventures, their education, all of those pieces, right? So the environmental policy then affects all of the other policies that we need to work on and that we need to address to really provide the quality of life that everyone on this call wants, everyone I represent wants, right? We want that security. We want to live a life that is free of those concerns, okay? One thing I heard, I think again it was Angela, but it may have been someone else talking about Hoosier Action, which is a group that's very vocal in my district as well when it comes to cleaning up environmental accidents or just holding people accountable and solving the problems that we've had in our area, right? Like the EPA Superfund site that I mentioned. I went to my first Hoosier Action meeting and they were very clear with me that they are a nonpartisan group. Okay, I almost got myself in a little bit of trouble because they are nonpartisan. They did not want to hear about political party. And I understand very much why. They are nonpartisan because the environment does not care what your political party is. The environment and the policies we put in place will impact every single Hoosier. They don't care how you voted in the primary. The environment will not care how you vote in November. And because the environment doesn't care about our party, parties should have no part of how we think about environmental policy. We all have to be on one team to solve the issues we have with our environment, whether it is putting better legislation in place to make sure people who are renting homes know what's going on there, right? The Right to Know Act. Whether it is providing more infrastructure to prevent flooding in different areas of the state. It could be policies in place to prevent accidents, or then holding the actual companies responsible for those accidents accountable after the fact, right? So we know who's paying the monetary figures for those cleanup jobs. All of those are important. All of those are what we need. But we know that every single person in this state cares about the environment, right? We know that. We need to put the policies in place that will do that. And that's what I really, like, I appreciate Jesse talking about it. I appreciate all of the people on this, in this forum, in this discussion. I appreciate the people listening. We need everyone to be on board to fix the environment, okay? And whether that's moving to renewable energy, again, Cinde was talking about learning about that in college. I remember one of the debate topics, I think it was my freshman year of high school, so mid-90s, it was renewable energy resources, right? And creating plans to build renewable energy infrastructure in the United States, okay? That was longer ago than I would like to admit. And we still are working on these policies because we have done damage. One thing I loved that Jesse said, and I will wrap up with this, I know I'm taking more time than I'm supposed to. He talked about the two narratives. He talked about the narrative of people who think everything is fine, nothing to worry about, we are good. And then he talked about the narrative that we are killing the planet and we might as well move to Mars because there's nothing we can do to solve it. And then he said that we're somewhere in the middle. And that means we have a chance. We have a chance to rally together, work with groups like Hoosier Action, and build a better system of environmental policies that will really protect and serve and support all of the Hoosiers, all of the Hoosiers in the state of Indiana, and hopefully set up ideas for the nation. Again, I really appreciate the time to talk and speak about this and listen to the other ideas. I really think if we have good representation at the State House, that good representation found here, we can really make a difference for the people of the state of Indiana and their quality of life.
All right, thank you, Tiffany. Okay, so, well, okay, we went a little long, but we want to go back to Jesse now. So, and okay, no pressure here, Jesse. We got a lot of issues that have come up, and now, you know, we have gone a little over time. So we hope you can respond to all of our candidates, you know, in a meaningful way, like you always do. So, so what do you think?
I'll try my best, Deb. First of all, 2 points of applause. One applause to you, Deb, and to Shannon for these great candidates. I really appreciate your leadership and helping to support them and cultivate them. And then another point of applause to all of you for the candidates, for your, you know, the substantive thinking that you put into this, the research you put into that. I can't emphasize how heartening it is that all of you took the time to really think through these issues, because that speaks so well of how you would do as a lawmaker. I don't think there are enough elected officials who truly are are invested in research. They will rely on maybe what the opinion of a colleague is, or they will kind of default into an ideological general position and have their worldview decide how they think about an issue rather than really digging into it. So I applaud you for your commitment to research. I also want to say that, you know, you will be most potent with this intersection of doing something that truly is a source of passion for you and that really matters to your constituents. And from what I've been hearing from all of you, I really think you've hit that, many of you have hit that point of intersection, again, of doing something that personally is meaningful to you and also matters to your district, and that will allow you to carry forward legislation to the finish line through this arduous process, which can take 3 to 5 years for meaningful laws to become adopted. Okay, so with those broad statements, the way that I'll try to answer these questions is to say that I will try to answer them from the lens of what I think a lawmaker could do. So, you know, there's a whole array for any given topic. I could say, okay, well, you know, you go to this agency or you talk to this county person, but I'll try to answer it from the context of how you could help on a legislative, from a legislative lens. So I'll try to start from the beginning to Angela, you know, who spotlighted right to know. You know, that's a bill. That's a bill that I personally didn't examine last legislative session, but I will say a couple of things. One is that I think that to carry it forward, and I know Hoosier Action is a very skilled organization. I haven't partnered with them in any capacity, but I know good things about them. But I would say that it's so important that there is clarity in a legislature that is overwhelmingly skeptical of passing laws that are perceived to be redundant or expansive of federal law. It's so important that there's clarity that this right to know bill is very clearly distinct from the federal right to know bill, which of course has empowered a lot of communities to have the knowledge to then figure out, okay, well, what are the big toxic threats in my community? You know, this law that was passed in 1986 at the federal level. So that's just one off the cuff piece of advice. The other is, you know, what I'm hearing from you more generally is sort of this sense of, okay, concern about an array of toxic threats in your district. Some of which are of a groundwater contamination nature. And, you know, I think this gets to the importance of really being a champion for IDEM. I know that a lot of people are skeptical or almost dismissive of the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, which is our state EPA. But I think if I were in your shoes, Angela, I mean, I would take the position of really drawing out, okay, well, what are the inventory of cleanup programs that IDEM has, like the Indiana Cleanup Program and the Brownfields Program that's administered by the Indiana Finance Authority and the State Superfund Program, really digging into them and their effectiveness and how can they be better, given that there are going to be some really tight budget cycles, this in 2021 and again probably in 2023 because of COVID. How do we make IDEM be as effective as it possible in, you know, accelerating cleanups so that less people are exposed to these toxins? So those are some kind of off-the-cuff thoughts in response to some of your reflections. With respect to Cinde of the South Side, Cinde, I would just say that you know, one thing that stands out to me is that if you could find a way of getting on the House Ways and Means Committee, that would be fantastic, because I know that's a coveted position and not a lot of freshman lawmakers get it. But what I really feel when you talk about enforcement and about the fact that you're concerned about, you know, the quality of enforcement of laws in the books, whether they're administering federal environmental law or administering state environmental law, you know, what is the quality of enforcement on the part of IDEM? I would just think it's so important to draw out in a budget committee hearing when IDEM presents to the Ways and Means Committee, real clarity. Okay, how many people are employed in IDEM who work on enforcement? And what is the enforcement process now compared to it 10 years ago. And my personal perspective, it's not as problematic compared to how things operated 10 years ago. So it would be to be the hawk in really scrutinizing how enforcement is done. And from drawing that out, you may well have the information necessary to make the case to the chair of the Ways and Means Committee that, look, I really think there's a case to be made to increase the budget of IDEM specifically for enforcement. So again, some off-the-cuff thoughts for you there, Cinde. Let's see. I'm wearing my contact lenses, so I'm a little bit farsighted. I know Julie, I think, right, was next. Right. So Julie, you brought up two issues about flooding, and you brought up the issue of temperature. So with respect to rural flooding, I would say I would love to see you being a champion for the Clean Water Indiana program. And of course, this is the main program that funds the soil and water conservation districts in Indiana. And, you know, it's fascinating. They are some of the most interesting people I've encountered in all my years in Indiana. They're deeply passionate about what they do. They're very knowledgeable and they're very innovative. And, you know, they need more vocal champions in the State House. They are tremendously well organized, but how many people will articulate their positions in a floor speech or in committee, I think is fairly rare. But what I could see you doing as a champion of the Clean Water Indiana program is really figuring out, okay, how can we invest more in two-stage ditches, which is a really critical strategy to mitigate flooding in rural parts of Indiana. And, you know, another area that I would really suggest you're championing is with respect to Department of Natural Resources fee in lieu program, where the provision under the state isolated wetland law was one in which, you know, if you developed a piece of property, you'd have to offset it by building an artificial wetland. And they found that program to be pretty problematic. And so what they instead did is they said, okay, developer, if you're going to destroy some isolated wetland, I should say more precisely, some wetland that's administered by state law, then you have the opportunity to pay a fee to DNR. And what that does is it creates a big pool of money for DNR to then develop wetlands of their own. And as a lawmaker, you might be able to help steer some of those dollars to East Central Indiana, and because you have such data showing how problematic flooding is to that part of the state, and maybe help to facilitate the development of wetlands in that area as a champion of the DNR in lieu fee program. With respect to the temperature issue, you know, as you know, plant geneticists are thinking about, okay, how do we create more evolved corn and bean crops that can withstand higher temperatures? You know, educating your lawmakers about that would be good. I think another kind of immediate thought I had when I was listening to that is about just the importance of Hoosier farmers continuing to diversify. I know Hoosier farmers are super resilient and innovative as they are, but I would just underscore the importance of, you know, hemp, for example, as a huge growth opportunity in Indiana. There's been the regulatory infrastructure in our state is such that it's going to lead to a boomlet at the very least in hemp. And it just has so many different benefits, as you probably knew. They're very deep rooted, so they're great for soil and water, and they have abundant commercial uses. And so, you know, it presents an opportunity to figure out, okay, as a lawmaker, how can I work with Purdue Extension and Soil and Water Conservation District officers to maybe help influence the crop patterns of farmers in my region, and perhaps also to get into the carbon market, which is finally getting discussion in the state legislature. There's actually going to be a study committee hearing in about 10 days or 2 weeks about that issue, where how can farmers get into terrestrial sequestration so that they can make money essentially by storing more and more carbon. Kind of speaks to Emma's point about job opportunities, which are tremendously abundant in terms of tackling the climate crisis. Let's see, who was next? I want to try to get to
I think Theresa was next. Yeah.
Theresa was next. All right, great. Theresa, yes. When I was thinking about your reflections on flooding issues and again, a very urbanized community, what came to mind from a project level, and then I'll speak to it from a legislative level, is that, is simply having the Marion County Soil and Water Conservation Districts present to Warren Park and do a workshop for the citizens of Warren Park and say, okay, here's how you can get into the world of putting in rain barrels and installing rain gardens and potentially even investing in something like green roofs, so that Warren Park essentially becomes a showcase of innovation in green infrastructure. And I think that, knowing you, Theresa, you'll get so fired up about this that as a senator, you will then channel, what you've been able to do, help to facilitate in Warren Park into being a champion in the urban context for the Clean Water Indiana program. So while Julie's championing it from a rural lens and talking about how two-stage ditches are, helping to reduce flooding in rural India, and you can talk about urban benefits of green infrastructure. And I will tell you what you can imagine exists in the legislature is the urban-rural divide, where programs that rural lawmakers are super passionate about, urban lawmakers may not know anything about, and vice versa. And so here's a bridging strategy where you can build political support among urban lawmakers for the Clean Water Indiana program, and boom, Julie and Theresa are helping to expand funding for Clean Water Indiana. So I think those are my thoughts there. Let's see, next was it Cinde Wirth or?
Yeah, Cinde was next, yeah.
Cinde was next. Okay, alternative energy. Yes, I mean, what I heard from you is a lament about the pace of the transition from coal to renewable energy. And I understand. I will say that there are two great stories to be told in Indiana, actually two of many stories to be told, but two noteworthy ones are that we have this reputation that the 5 investor-owned utilities in Indiana are very regressive. And certainly having been in my professional life deeply involved in that realm, I can attest to what a formidable power they are and how they can block that transition. But the interesting thing is that there's been this unusual alignment between environmentalists and investor-owned utilities, in the sense that both communities believe that the future is solar plus storage, that's where the trajectory of the energy economy is going to be. And so the good news is that the coalition for clean energy is unprecedented in size in Indiana. And I can attest to that from being involved in Indiana public policy for 15 years, 13 based in Indiana and a couple years based in Chicago. There's been a mindset change, and there's this big coalition that is backing renewable energy. And that manifested itself in the 2019 session, the defeat of a bill that would have created a moratorium on certain size projects that was a not so veiled threat at utility scale renewable energy. And there was another bill that did become law in 2020, HB 1414, that again became law, and at a superficial paper level does slow the transition from coal to renewables. But in a more substantive level, when you really dig into the details of the statute, it's actually quite weak. And the fact that it's weak is a reflection of the fact that it went through at least a few major iterations of weakening over the legislative process. And that would not have happened had it not been for this increasingly strong coalition of unlikely partners coming together and really pushing back. So that to me is a very heartening sign of what the future is like. And so now you have utilities like Vectren in Southwest Indiana and NIPSCO in Northwest Indiana who are on a path to rapid decarbonization at levels that really are worthy of national attention. In fact, NIPSCO in Northwest Indiana has gotten national attention. I don't know if Veteran has to that degree, and it's partly because NIPSCO was a first mover, one of the first movers in the country. But that to me is a heartening development. All right, let's see. Next would be Laura?
Emma.
Emma. Oh, that's right, Emma. Okay. Well, yes, and Emma, I really appreciate your idea there of job training, and particularly your spotlight on job training for displaced fossil fuel workers or potentially displaced fossil fuel workers. I think that is spot on. And I think that, you know, what I was thinking when I was hearing that is like, wow, Emma could also be that bridge between Democrats and Republicans on this very issue. Because, you know, one of the legitimate concerns that was raised, there was a lot of illegitimate arguments that were made in the context of the debate over HB 1414 in the 2020 session, a lot of illegitimate, bogus arguments. But there were some legitimate ones, which is a genuine anxiety about employment in coal regions of our state. I mean, this is a state that we almost see in our DNA, coal. I mean, it appears on major websites of the state government. You go to various business conferences and we say, we're a coal state. So it's deeply embedded into the psyche of a lot of Hoosiers. Now, things are changing as solar farms crop up all over the state, and they're going to accelerate tremendously based on projects in the pipeline. So that mindset is going to change, but the anxiety is not. And so it's so important to, I really appreciate your focus on saying, okay, I want to help those coal field areas and help to expedite their transition. And I know implicitly in your point, you were probably also thinking about the victims of coal pollution. That is to say, communities, poor communities, often communities of color who have borne the brunt of being exposed to fugitive dust from coal ash dumps, or being exposed to, obviously sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, particulate matter being emitted from these coal plants. And so making sure that jobs also benefit those communities, those EJ communities, is also important. And I think that there, one concrete thing you can do, in addition to sort of working in a bipartisan way to pass legislation that helps to focus job training on these areas that have been hit hard in this transition, is to really build a relationship with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation and say, okay, how can you guys help to facilitate more investment in low carbon, zero carbon technologies, and help to direct that investment to these areas that are, either victims of coal pollution or will be at a loss for jobs as we fully transition away from coal. So those are my thoughts for you. Let's see.
Laura Fred Smith was next.
Yes, Laura, okay.
I get you.
Thanks for cueing me there, Deb. So for Laura, I guess, so you brought up two distinct issues. I guess you brought up rural flooding. That was one concern up there in Cass County that I was hearing for you, being in a more rural part of the county. And again, I would just underscore the importance of being a champion for Clean Water Indiana. See, the problem is Clean Water Indiana has a great grassroots constituency because every soil and water conservation district loves the program, right? It helps to fund their work and they speak to their lawmakers about it. That's the good news. The bad news is that an important part of how that program is funded is through the cigarette tax. And of course, we're delighted to see reductions in cigarette usage in Indiana, since that's a huge public health problem in our state. But again, it's a source of funding for the Clean Water Indiana program. And that's why there needs to be a broader cast of characters, a broader cast of lawmakers that are actively championing the Clean Water Indiana program. Again, there's a lot of grassroots support for Clean Water Indiana, but there need to be people who go to the mat in the State House, in Ways and Means committees, in Senate Appropriations committees, and saying, gosh, I really think this program is great. We need to see this program be adequately funded. And so that, again, will solve rural flooding problems, which all of you know are going to get exacerbated because of climate change. As some of you have alluded to the Purdue climate change research work, it is going to be exacerbated because of climate change affecting our state. The other element you brought up, of course, is Walt's sustainable products. I think this is incredibly controversial plant that is emitting problematic levels of lead and mercury. They were defeated in Muncie, and now a formidable grassroots coalition is working to try to defeat it in near Logansport. We're very familiar with the issue. In my professional life, and again, I have to be a little bit anonymous in describing that, given that this is the political nature of this call. In my professional life, our organization is very attuned to the developments there, and one of our staff members has been deeply involved in being a resource to that coalition. And then I guess finally, is it Tiffany?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't miss anybody, right? Yes, so Tiffany, what I was hearing from you is just the importance that the issues that we talk about here, the plethora of issues that we talk about here are relevant to people in multiple ways in terms of their quality of life and their health. That these are, again, issues that transcend political party, whatever, professional background, what have you. One very concrete piece of advice here, which I think is really actually one to relate to everybody, is just how lawmakers need to be more proactive in drawing in academics to testify before the General Assembly. And, you spoke of the need for, kind of making the case for, if I'm hearing you properly, making the case for environmental protection from a health lens, that, there's a real intimate link between toxic exposure and health outcomes. So having epidemiologists testify in the General Assembly, having people who are public health experts in general testifying in the legislature, that's a community, that I very much care about and have really nice relationships with, but they're not enough of a presence in the State House. And it really takes a concerted effort on the part of lawmakers to say, yes, I want you, academic from Purdue, IU, what have you, come and speak before the General Assembly on this particular topic. I think you also spoke of the importance of coalition building. That cannot be, stated enough. Passing meaningful legislation in the General Assembly requires grand coalitions, because special economic interests have tremendous political weight. And the default is that the policies that come out of the General Assembly are unduly colored by these special interests. And so public interest groups, regular citizens, and groups that haven't engaged in the legislative process, if they all come together, then they can act as the appropriate counterweight in conjunction with lawmakers like you who deeply care about the public interest. I'll say one more thing, and then I'll pause. And that final comment is that my general counsel to candidates for office is, speaking as a private citizen again, is to scrutinize the voting records of your opponents. I see candidates for office talk both generally about ideals and specifically about problems, and both of those are good. But I don't see candidates for office talk enough about voting records. And there are some really troubling votes that lawmakers have taken that they need to be held accountable for, that the citizens of your district are not aware of. And if they were aware of problematic votes that made solar energy less affordable, that stripped away a program that helped to reduce energy bills for the average Hoosier, particularly in this economically struggling environment of the COVID recession. The fact that these things happened, that these lawmakers did things that are against the interest of your rank and file Hoosier, needs to be known, needs to be spotlighted, and you're the best position to do that. So please dig in to the voting records of these candidates. So that will be my one general counsel to everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jesse. Oh my gosh, you have done such an amazing job. You do not disappoint. So I so appreciate all of your comments on all of those questions. And so we've gone way over, so we will just have to wrap up. I want to do my big get out the vote spiel. There's all of us. And just remind everybody that you have to register to vote before October 5th. And the day after that, early voting starts. Please go to indianavoters.com so you can find out how to register. You can check your registration. You can register. You can find out where to go to vote. You can apply for an absentee ballot if it's appropriate. You can find out who's on your ballot at indianavoters.com. So there's my get out the vote thing. So now, thank you, everybody. Oh my gosh. I've been involved in environmental stuff for a long time, and that is the most important thing I've always learned, is that it's always really complicated. It's just never simple. So, so that makes a forum like this, just difficult. So, all right, I'm done. I'm going to throw it back to Shannon. She's going to wrap up for us. Thank you again, everybody.
Thanks to all the panelists. We received a wealth of information. What I heard was the grave concerns that we are facing in Indiana. I also heard about short-term and long-term plans to address these concerns. And the biggest thing I heard was a message of hope, that with good old-fashioned collaboration, hard work, and great stewardship and leadership in our state house, that we have the ability to turn this around and turn Indiana into an innovative, prosperous, and equitable future for all. And you have the ability to make a difference. All the voters out there, the people of Indiana, I encourage you to go to 25women42020.org and check out the campaigns of all these women. With a simple click, you can go right to one of their websites or social media. You can inbox them, find out how you can get involved in their campaigns and make a huge difference for all of us. And consider an investment in their campaigns, any one of them. Doesn't matter where you live, you can get involved in any of these campaigns. Again, go to 25women42020.org. Consider an investment in our movement to empower all these women, all 27. Thanks for all who joined us tonight. It was just an incredible evening. Lots of great information and lots of great plans to move forward. Thank you all.
All right. Good night.
Right.